Hello, my name's Nigel Church, product trainer for Cutting Edge Training here at Ransomes Jacobson. Today we're going to go through the setup of the turf groomer fitted to this particular cutting unit, and hopefully the tips gathered on this will help you set up groomers, whatever the machine may be that you're using. I've actually just set this one on cut and I've created the air gap I require, so it's just nipping the paper very nicely in between reel and bed knife, so I know that I have the air gap that I required. So that's the first thing we're going to do before we move ahead to then check the height of cut before setting the groomer cutting height. A relatively simple setting bar like this enables me to achieve the 4mm height of cut that I require. So that's simple contact of the screw under the lip of the bed knife. Setting the height of cut with a bar like this can be relatively simple. I've used a 4mm Allen key, nipped it under the head of the screw, and that's my 4mm height of cut. So using Allen keys, obviously in even number sizes, can be a very quick way to set the height of cut. Of course, there are other ways of doing this. We can go extremely accurate with a gauge like this, where we have an indicator where we can accurately determine the height of cut we're trying to achieve. This one is set to 4mm, and again I should be able to slip that under the lip of the blade like so, and I have a very accurate 4mm height of cut. So we've set our bed knife to our reel, so we have a nice cutting action. We have set our height of cut, and in this case it's 4mm. We've now got to set up our groomer. And our groomer in its operation is going to cut into the very top surface of our sward, and this is where we must err on the side of caution. Take a little off at a time. If you take a small amount off and it's not enough, you can take a little bit more off. If you take too much off in one go, you cannot replace it. It has to grow back naturally. So err on the side of caution, particularly if a turf groomer is new to your environment that you're working in. So what are we going to do to set up the groomer operational cutting height? If I go back to the setting bar, if you recall, there's a 4mm height there between the screw and the setting bar itself. Further along here I have another screw. That is poking through only 2mm, half that of the height of cut. Putting this down, I should just quickly slacken off the locking bolts for the groomer, and we will now lay this across the cutting unit assembly, ensuring that the screw is approximately in the center of the groomer shaft assembly, and by turning it backwards and forwards like so, I can set it so that the tip of the blades on the groomers should be just touching the bottom of the bolt. Not quite there yet, so I should just give it another little turn on that end. Once I've achieved up both ends, it's just a matter of locking off the groomer, and from there on it will stay at that setting, and I now have a grooming depth of 2mm below the actual height of cut, which, if you recall, is 4mm. Again, the warning here would be err on the side of caution. If you feel that this is something new to your greens, and your greens may be perhaps relatively soft, or it's that time of year when there's been a lot of rain and the greens could naturally be spongy, then it might be you want to set that operational depth to only 1mm. But again, it's down to your own conditions, your own turf conditions, your own environment, as to how you set the groomer up. Our normal recommendation is half the mowing height as an initial starting point. And bear in mind, it is a turf groomer, it is not some kind of scarifier. So having locked off the settings now, we can turn our cutting unit over, and it's ready for fitting to our respective mower. So there's our unit set at 4mm height of cut, with turf groomer fitted and an operational working depth of 2mm, half the mowing height. Now, of course, not everybody wants a turf groomer, and there are the options of just stiff bristle brushes. And this type of attachment has been around for many, many years, going back to the times when most machines were pedestrian operated. And here we would have this fitted in front of the cutting unit. There's our front roller, and our brush is just dragging along behind, flicking up the turf surface, standing it up prior to the reel and bed knife cutting the grass. But even these, do have adjustments. So there's a small amount of adjustment on this brush assembly. It doesn't necessarily have to be digging into the grass. It can be just touching the top surface. And again, very, very basically, we can lay our setting bar across our rollers and just see if there's a gap between this stiff bristle brush and the setting bar itself. So we have alternatives yet again. So we have the turf groomer, we have stiff bristle brushes, and here we have a power-driven brush. Some people may have found in the past that the steel-bladed groomer is perhaps too aggressive. The brush assembly has had a pretty good effect, but we now have the ability to have a power-driven brush to improve the sward surface without the necessity perhaps of cutting into it with the turf groomer. So we now have the ability to fit in brushes into cutting units, and these brushes again can either rotate in the same direction as the reel assembly, or they can contra-rotate. And these will have different benefits at different times of the year and on different turf surfaces. Well, obviously different types, fescues, bents, all determine what aggression or what type of system you may require to use. So hopefully this has been a few helpful tips here on the setting up of the turf groomer. It's been with us for a long time. It's sometimes been misused, but hopefully there's been some tips here which will have helped in the setting up when it comes to the operational depth that we're going to set the groomer to. And as we've illustrated here, we're running at half of the height of cut when it comes to the depth of the groomer blades going into the sward. So to finish up, err on the side of caution. Taking off too much is a problem. You can't put it back. If you take off a little, you can take off more. Thank you very much.